First things first, Andrew, how are you?
Pretty good. Yeah.
Okay. Well, before we talk about your latest record, I'd like to start at the beginning. Do you have a first musical memory?
I remember my dad holding the violin and I was jumping for it, trying to grab it, and he was trying to talk to me about responsibility of not smashing a...
Because you started playing at a very early age?
Yeah, I started with you start with a Cracker Jack box with a ruler taped to it, and you go to the teacher and you bow to them, and then you go home. So then, or you know, and then when I finally got an actual violin, I was very excited.
Did you take to it immediately?
I did. I wouldn't say I was like a prodigy. Thank goodness I wasn't, actually.
Well, why not? Why thank goodness?
Because most prodigies I know have nervous breakdowns when they're, 16 or 17. My musical early life was very natural and low pressure.
So glad not to be a prodigy because...
Yeah, I mean, I remember there were this husband and wife teachers that were in the business of creating prodigies, and they came to pick me to go through their process, and my mother said no, because she thought it was too invasive, it was too much pressure. So it was cool. I mean, it was just fun. Next thing you know, you can play pretty well. You don't really think about it much. You just do it. And then the fact that the real key fact of how I learned was that yes, the repertoire was Bach and Mozart, but it was completely by ear. No reading at all.
Okay.
And if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be sitting here, I think.
Well, yeah, because what kind of influence, if you look back now, does that have on what you make now? To be able to do it that way?
Yeah, I mean, even though I went through a conservatory training and everything, I always held on to that really natural, like no middleman, just if I hear it, I can play it. It's a musical language. And when I hear other musical language, I absorb it and can play that, that every accent, every, thing that makes that music unique. And yeah, I think just my ear grew and grew and grew. And I did learn to read music, but I've never had to, because my ear always learns the music faster than my brain can.
In that way, because music's all around us. So is it difficult then to separate what you kind of hear all around you and what you think of creatively?
For sure. I mean, that's a big part of it. I can never tune anything out, and it's maddening. Conversations, a television in the background. So on one hand, it can be very maddening and distracting. On the other hand, those things can be inspiring too.
Sure.
Like the squeak of the brakes on a truck, the tone that creates, or the pitch that creates, could be the beginning of a new piece of music.
So when you start writing or start the process of an album, do you kind of lock yourself up in a room to kind of clear your mind, or are all these influences coming in? And
I have in the past. I mean, that's when I 10 years ago developed the palette that I use today. Was when I moved out into the country, left my band, was by myself. I mean, it was extreme. I had to put myself in a vacuum to find out what was really going inside me, because I was so susceptible to other people's record collections. When I would play music with them, if I play with a bass player that, I don't know, only listens to the Kinks or something, then, or whatever, I'll get pulled in his direction, and next thing I know, my ideas are co-opted by that. So I had to just clear the room. And generally, historically, when I do empty the room of other people, that's when the most unique, personal stuff comes out.
Okay.
With this one, it was certainly a band effort. And the writing was more externalized than ever before. So I was really going to people I really respected and said, any ideas? You know, like, how can I make this better?
Was there a particular reason for this change, to kind of approach it this way?
After a while, yeah, I mean, this is my 13th record, you know. I never, in 13 records, never used a producer before. Was always suspicious, didn't trust anyone, probably with good reason. But I had some interactions with some pretty heavy people like Randy Newman or Paul Simon and John Prine, people like that I really respect, where I was like, people that are still, you know, these elder statesmen that are still trying to make better music. And I was kind of like, maybe it's time to seek some counsel, you know, on what I'm doing, make the process more rigorous. Because when you're just by yourself, yeah, for a while it was just me in my barn, then going straight to the stage and having this communication with the audience, which was great. But sometimes when you're by yourself a lot, you can really sort of get away with murder and
become self-indulgent.
Well, and that's what you have to do sometimes. But I wanted the process to be a little more rigorous. Like, I wanted an editor, or yeah, it just seemed like, well, other mediums have a vetting process.
Sure.
Why not songwriting?
And then I believe you found Tony Burke. Can you name me one thing that's kind of in one way in which he had an effect on how the album turned out?
Well, for instance, the first song, Capsized, which is a song I've been doing for 12 years on stage, and it's been through many transmutations, and it was time to put it on a record. So I was just overwhelmed with the possibilities. I mean, there's maybe 15 different versions of Capsized over the years. First of all, he said, this song needs a chorus. And so I wrote a chorus. That's pretty basic stuff. And second, I just assumed that I was gonna rip a lead on violin. I was gonna play a solo, you know. And I started to, and we both realized this right away. It's like, as fun as that would be, it took all the cool kind of space out of it, you know.
Right.
We were trying, some of the reference points I had before I went to make this record were like the meters, the kind of efficiency of some early funk and soul music, and the efficiency of like dub or reggae or whatever in the rhythm section and the space that's in there. And so I went in and I played a great, I think it was pretty fun, cool solo, but the violin took the listener somewhere else.
Was it then difficult, because you say you've been doing this by yourself all these years, so, and then now all of a sudden there's somebody saying, well, I don't think that solo fits. Was that difficult to deal with somebody else telling you kind of?
Sometimes, but I trusted Tony. He's a smart guy. There's a lot of people I wouldn't trust their instincts, but yeah, I just didn't quite know what a producer was supposed to do, except maybe try to keep you honest or keep you focused on the... But I've always worn all the hats, and that's incredibly stressful. And sometimes the last thing, sometimes your actual vocal performance is an afterthought.
Mm.
The most important thing becomes secondary. And there used to be, in making records, used to be a division of labor. There were arrangers, and I would envy people, like Elvis didn't even write the songs. He would just walk into the soundstage and sing and go home.
Right.
And that's never going to happen with me, but it was, a little bit of help didn't hurt.
So was it liberating in a sense to be able to concentrate on certain areas of the creative process?
Yes and no. I mean, it was no different than it always is. I'm a wreck when I'm making a record. I just can't sleep because you can't turn it off when you're done. So I go for 5-6 days in a row, and by the end I look like hell, and I just don't know which way's up. It's just the way it always is. But what was I gonna say? That the process of making this record was way more demanding and way more rigorous for everybody in the room. It was actually Tony and Blake Mills, who's also a great producer, going around the room and like working with everybody, and like nothing was like, oh, that bass line's fine. Every part had to be a melody, a hook, completely intentional.
And then, so this is the sonic side of the record. Mm-hmm. And then, when do the lyrics come in? Is that something you kind of delve into by yourself?
Yeah, it's a fairly private process. Some of them were written very quickly, but songs like Left-Handed Kisses had a long journey, Capsized had a long journey. But yeah, Left-Handed Kisses began as a challenge to myself to write a simple love song that's not trite, that still sounds like me, and knowing, and to make it even really hard for myself, the chorus of the song or the main line had to have baby in it, just to be like, this is what 95% of pop songs are about. I could do this. So, of course, it became this very self-conscious thing in a funny way. Like, first it was my point of view, how I would write a love song on my terms, which has certain qualifications to it. It's like, I'm like, whoa, how did I don't believe in fate, but it begs the question, how did I find you among the multitudes? Mm-hmm. And then I said, oh, man, that's just so, like, if I really want to show my unconditional love, it wouldn't have those conditions to it. It would be just like, sure. And that's where Fiona's voice started coming in. It was my own doubt saying, you're full of shit, or this isn't good enough. And so it was just this internal conversation. And then I start going through the process of saying, this is me speaking and this is her speaking, which is not obvious all the time. Because when it's in your own head, you don't need pronouns. Mm-hmm. You don't need to say he or she. So there's oftentimes like a lot of first person, third person, present, past, working out some details that aren't necessary when it's all inside your head.